Neia took out her bow and knocked an arrow. Shizu raised her magic gun as well. I'll take the right, you take the left, Shizu-san. Shizu formed a circle with her thumb and her index finger. The two of them exchanged looks, and then Shizu pushed open the door. Neia made eye contact with a nearby Demihuman, about 1.5 meters away. He did not know what was going on or who they were. The Demihuman was so surprised that he could not parse the situation, but Neia did not hesitate and put an arrow into him. With the Katsun, the arrow pierced his skull through the forehead. I did it. While Nia's skills had played a part, most of the work had been done by the Ultima Shooting Star Super. Thank you, Your Majesty. Just as Nia's arrow pierced the Demihuman through the head, Shizu's spell gun blew off half of the other Demihuman's head. The Demihumans made more noise when they collapsed than Neia had expected. Neia hurriedly pricked up her ears. Fortunately, she could not hear anyone running towards this place. It would seem nobody had spotted them yet. Hurry. They had already assigned their tasks beforehand. As Shizu dragged the corpses into the room they had just entered with the rope, Neia used the smell-clearing item Shizu had lent her. After that, she reached for the water skin on her belt and poured the powerful wine within all over the place, washing away the chunks of meat, brains, skull and bloodstains on the ground. As the stench of alcohol filled the air, Shizu emerged from the room, then produced an empty wine jug and poured a little bit of the jug's wine inside, before quietly ripping it up and leaving it in place. Let's go. Yes. While they had tried to cover it up, it was very likely that the next shift would sense something was up when they came to take over. She would be able to relax if they could put the bodies into Shizu's mysterious pocket dimension, but Shizu said that she would not do so, thus they left the corpses in the room. Of course, they had made preparations there too, but there was no way to make sure that they would not be found. They had to assume that they did not have the luxury of ample time. Eventually, they reached the second obstacle, the aerial walkway. Of the several scenarios they had come up with, this was the closest to being ideal. They still had time and nobody had spotted them yet. It's a race against time now. I know. If I slip, don't worry about me. The path from the castle to the tower was roughly 2 people wide. There were no walls on either side, it was open to the air. Apparently several people had fallen off the side before, and after seeing this, all she could think of was that it was only to be expected. This aerial walkway was the reason why this place was the final redoubt when engaging invaders during a siege. A large force could not pass through here, so an advantage in numbers would be nullified. At the same time, there was also the risk of falling. If there was a spear line at the end of the path, breaking through would be very difficult. This design was the kind that attackers hated. One would need magic casters with attack spells like Fireball to take it down. Using ranged weapons for a sustained attack was disadvantageous for Neia's side, which was operating stealthily and under time constraints. Therefore, all they could do was charge into close range and finish off the enemy, while the enemy could hit them with ranged weapons, and they did not have the benefit of cover. In that case, they would need to close the gap before the sentry spotted them. But at a closer look, the path was uneven. It was designed to slow down anyone trying to run across and force them to slip and fall off the sides. This is dangerous. If an enemy runs into me and grabs me, I'll fall off and die. If I'm not careful. After screwing up her determination, Neia realized Shizu was staring at her. Although they were the same sex, being stared at by Shizu, the doll-like beauty, made Neia a little embarrassed. Well, what? Using it. Neia, wait here. I'll take care of the door guards. No matter what happens, don't come out. Before she could get an answer, Shizu vanished. She had disappeared. This was not some kind of high-speed movement. Shizu had been standing here until just now, and then she had vanished into the air like she had been an illusion. A wave of confusion assaulted Neia. However, Shizu had already told her to wait, so she ought to stay here and wait. Neia concealed herself at the entrance to the aerial walkway, and listened carefully to the tower and the path behind her for anything out of the ordinary. Several seconds later something happened at the guard post. She heard a scream and then the sound of the guard collapsing. Neia poked her face out to see what was going on, and saw Shizu emerge from the guard post. Shizu waved to beckon Neia over. As Neia began to panic and wonder what was happening, Shizu's waving gesture grew larger, until her entire body was moving. Could she not go, now that Shizu had done that much? Neia bent low, then ran across the windswept, frightening aerial walkway, as she paid attention to her footing. After she was across, she could smell blood from the guard post. Several dead demihumans lay on the ground, and Shizu stood inside, with her usual blank expression. She held what looked like a very sharp and large knife in her right hand. The blade was smeared bright red, and she had her spell gun in her left hand. Clear. Move in. Ah, yes. Can't disappear again today. Be careful. Got it. It would seem there was no need to explain, so Neia did not ask, but merely followed behind her. That's a maid demon for you, Neia thought. She could not have come all this way without Shizu, and this is also thanks to the order His Majesty gave to Shizu. Only the Sorcerer King could inspire greater respect in people even when he was not present. Honestly, the fact that he was undead or whatever was a trifling problem. I need to let everyone know, after all. I need to tell them how great a person His Majesty is. The tower was almost completely made of stone, and it only had a small window for light. It was darker than the castle that they had passed through earlier. The passage inside the tower was quite spacious, big enough for Neia and Shizu to walk side by side. It spiraled up along the inside of the tower's wall. Their objective, the Zern Prince, ought to be near the top, so the only thing they did when passing doors along the way was check for movement inside, while the two of them continued ever upwards. About 2 circuits later, Shizu raised her hand to signal that they should stop. This happened almost at the same time as Neia's keen hearing picked up some creature's footsteps. It would seem it was wearing metal armor, because she could hear the sound of metal striking stone. It's alone, Shizu-san. Yes. But heavy footsteps. Neia could not tell, but if Shizu said it, then it was probably so. In other words, whatever it was not human-sized. What should we do? Should we hide behind one of the doors we pass along the way? It's already here. Kill it. Neia readied her bow after Shizu. Her plan was to shoot first and not bother with questions. She had heard that the Zern Prince was about the size of a human child. In addition, he would not be wearing metal armor. A massive object came into view, and Neia and Shizu attacked without hesitation. The arrow and bullets entered its body, as though they had been sucked in. Gah! The massive object stumbled and backed up along the path. Since it had retreated along a curved path, it was no longer in the line of fire. The fact that it had survived their attacks, particularly Shizu's, suggested that it was a very tough demi-human. What? Who are you? An angry cry echoed from the depths of the passage. What should we do, Shizu-san? Can't sit here and wait. Close in and attack before the enemy gathers the tower guards. Understood. Neia and Shizu broke into a run. Since it could survive Shizu and Neia's surprise attack, they could assume that it was the guardian of Va'an. Va'ans were beings which possessed very good overall fighting power and a shocking amount of stamina. As they ran, the humidity in the air seemed to increase as well. Neia's nose picked up the scent of rain. Go. To think there'd be humans here. After closing in, they saw a massive demi-human. While it possessed the savage air of an ogre, it looked much more intelligent than an ogre. Its skin was bluish-white, though it looked more demonic than unhealthy. It had a single thick horn on its forehead. It carried a mace that was bigger than Neia. Judging by its physical appearance, it was quite similar to the descriptions of the species known as Va'ans. While it was not as bad as Busser, it was still quite a dangerous opponent. The arrow and bullets had clearly hit it, but it did seem to be wounded. There was no smell of blood either, so it would seem it had not covered it up with illusions. Somehow, it had negated their attacks, particularly Shizu's. So you're here for my life, are you? You've got good eyes on you, humans. It seemed very happy. In that case, she would let it remain mistaken. No. Shizu fired as she spoke. There was a pop hiss of expelled gas as something flew through the air. After that, part of the Va'an's body dissolved into mist, and the bullet passed through. Wahahaha. Ranged weapons are useless against me. Neia loosed an arrow at the Va'an's forehead, but its head also sublimated into mist, and the arrow sank into the wall behind it. Useless. It's useless. Now quiver in fear of me, for I am the bane of all archers, and then die. Immune to all ranged weapons. On something that's only that strong. Shizu muttered. There must be a trick. Neia glanced at Shizu and shook her head. Unfortunately, the Zerns did not know any details about its abilities. What are you blathering about? Back up. The Va'an closed the gap. The sight of its massive body approaching them felt off, like her sense of distance was messed up. Neia would not be able to survive a single hit from it, so she obediently listened to Shizu and fell back. Shizu stood on the front line, and the mace slammed down on her. The strike was like a howling storm, but she elegantly evaded it. The Va'an's strength was extraordinary, given that it could swing a weapon that was as tall as Shizu with one hand. The stone was shattered where it had struck the ground, and cracks radiated in all directions. It felt like the massive tower was shaking. Tisk. Neia loosed an arrow. While the Va'an was locked in melee with Shizu, there was a huge difference between their body sizes. As she aimed up, she could strike the Va'an without hitting Shizu. As expected, the Va'an transformed into mist in order to avoid the arrow whistling through the air. Useless. Useless. I told you arrows are useless against me. Foolish, Yuo. The Va'an roared even louder than before. Shizu seemed to find it annoying and hacked at him. While Shizu's shooting skills were far superior to Neia's, she was not as skilled in close combat, so unfortunately, her strike was blocked by the mace. Neia knocked and drew back another arrow. This time, Neia aimed for the hand holding the mace. While it was very likely that the weapon would not drop even if it turned to mist, she decided that she had to try, however small the possibility. The misformed arm did not release the mace. Are you going to stop? Human the Vaughn presented a palm to Neia. Water splash. A ball of water flew out at Neia. Something hit her right shoulder. Neia was sent flying and fell to the ground. It hurt like she had been savagely beaten. She might even have broken bones. After nervously trying to move her right arm, she found that it could move without issue. However, a torrent of pain spread from her shoulder inside her body. She touched her shoulder and found that it was wet. While she was afraid that it was blood at first, she immediately realized that it was water. You made me use a petty spell. The Vaughn swung its mace as it spat its reply at them. Shizu muttered quietly to herself as she nimbly avoided a deadly stroke that could have smashed Neia to bits. Why that girl? Why attack someone who can't hit you? I don't get it. Ha, you idiot. That's because she's a pain. Because it was effective. Limited uses. The Vaughn's face changed. In other words, Shizu was right. Neia. Got it. Neia loosed an arrow, which the Vaughn avoided by turning into mist. After that, she fired again and the arrow pierced into the Vaughn. As the Vaughn grunted in pain, Shizu spoke. I understand. You can only defend against 7 ranged attacks. Is that per day? Per hour? Doesn't matter. You'll die here. The Vaughn could not catch up to Shizu, who dodged with amazing skill. In other words, if this kept up, it would take a one-sided beating and die. Perhaps the Vaughn had sensed this would happen, because his face knotted up. Damn you. Fog clue. A bank of fog sprang up.